Ladies, my fellow mommies, we are always so busy, on the go, kids screaming in the back seat, sleeping babies. I have the ultimate hack for you.
Welcome to the Stay Fit Mom Podcast with Krista and Tracy, your go-to girls for health, fitness, and keeping it real in mom life.
If you can't seem to get in a good groove with your nutrition and exercise program, this is for you.
We've coached thousands of women using macros for over 8 years, and I'm well known around here for my 5-day meal prep videos.
What does a macro balanced meal look like?
Hit subscribe to the Stay Fit Mom Podcast and join us for a fun, meaningful journey toward a healthier, happier you.
You got this, Mom.
Welcome back to the Stay Fit Mom Podcast. I am joined with Coach Emily. Welcome to the show, Emily. We're so glad that you're here.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
This is the second or third that you've been on the podcast?
I think the second.
It's the second time that Emily's been on the podcast. She is our registered dietitian. She is a wealth of knowledge. She has so many clients that love her, and she has done macro counting. She has switched over her habits program. And most recently, she has started collecting her own personal health data through a glucose monitor. So we are going to be talking about that. This season is all about the woman I want to become. That is the theme. And Emily is that in so many ways. We just had our coaches retreat, which feels like last week, but it was really a few months ago. And she is just the epitome of a woman that I want to be friends with, a woman that just does so well by her clients, and she reads and she's educated and she's constantly learning and studying. So anyway, we're so happy that you're here. And she has such a big family. So it's a true sacrifice for her to spend a good amount of time with me this morning. So welcome again, Emily. So glad you're here.
Thank you.
Let's just get right into it. And let's talk about your personal weight loss journey. Bring us up to speed.
This time last year, I had gotten to a point I felt like nothing was working for me. I was constantly exhausted. I had no capacity for anything. I was just in this cycle of being so busy, not prioritizing myself, running myself ragged. I could hit my macros, no problem. But I was really moody. I had kind of turned into a screaming mom all the time. And no matter what I did, I could not get the scale to move. I would maybe lose 5 pounds over the course of a year. And then anytime a holiday or a vacation came around, I would gain all that back plus more. And so it felt like I was just in this cycle. The thing that was incredibly frustrating was for my adult life, I'd always been fairly fit. I had no problem maintaining my weight. Generally, I would fall between 100 and 125 pounds. I'd run 3 full marathons. I had climbed Mount Kilimanjaro. I had been very active. I'm an older mom, so I had 4 pregnancies from age 34 to 40. 3 of them, I had gestational diabetes, which honestly was a huge shock. But by the time I had my last 2 pregnancies, my weight was starting to creep up a little bit, and it was higher than I was comfortable with. It was incredibly frustrating, just to be really honest, because a lot of my identity was very much, I'm healthy and I'm in shape. And if I'm being really honest, there's a ton of pressure in the nutrition and dietetics profession to maintain a thin appearance. And I was really susceptible to a lot of that. A lot of people will incorrectly equate thinness directly with your professional credibility. And so I was very self-conscious of that, and some of that self-induced. But I had gotten to a point after the pregnancies where I was getting into my 40s, and it had just become incredibly hard. At that same time, we moved back to the United States. It was the most stressful situation I've ever encountered. I still PTSD thinking about it. And so it kept being like when things settle down, I can pull myself together and feel more like myself. What I did not make the connection until a lot later is perhaps I had gone directly from postpartum into perimenopause. And so along with some genetics, lifestyle, environmental, and then just some of the natural process of aging with fluctuating estrogen levels, I had come into probably some insulin resistance. My body was not working that great. And so I feel like all that kind of came to a head late last fall.
So many of the things that you said, Emily, oh my gosh, I can totally relate with. Stay Fit Mom Tracy comes with a maybe personally induced, I've got to keep it together all the time and be my leanest all the time. And yeah, that's a heavy weight to carry around. So yeah,
It is. It is. If you are in health and wellness, you know it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. So many of the things that you just said, so many people can relate with having pregnancies later. And then, like you said, maybe even running straight into perimenopause, lots of hormonal issues, possibly some insulin resistance, a lot of stuff going on there. Do you feel because you were a dietitian, you were surprised that you still had things to learn about your own body?
That is a good question. No, it was not a surprise. I'm kind of a chronic tinkerer with health. If there is something I can try, I'm going to try it because I'm very curious in how bodies respond. And working with quite a few clients, you see the same inputs do not work for everyone. When I was having all those gestational diabetes pregnancies, I had 3 in a row, and I was always able to control them very easily with diet and lifestyle. However, there was a quote I stumbled upon during that time, and it said something like, your health during pregnancy is a window into your future. And that terrified me because I had had preeclampsia that turned into a seizure with my oldest. And then the next 3 pregnancies, I had gestational diabetes. And so in my mind, what I discovered with the insulin resistance that I'll talk more about later, that was not a surprise. I almost felt like I have a significant family history of diabetes. And that coupled with my own history of gestational diabetes, I felt like it was something that was coming for me in a way if I didn't get things under control. All that to say, it wasn't a surprise, but it was because between my own health and then working with clients, bodies are really different sometimes. And the same inputs just don't work for the same people. And that to me has always been really fascinating.
Yes, totally agree. And I think it's just a state of humility. We're lifelong learners. We're trying to evolve with new information that we get. And I love that you said you're kind of like a science experiment. We're just trying to see what works best for people. And you've really done that with this experiment that you've had on your own. So before we talk about that specifically, what made you transition from tracking macros to doing our habits program?
Yeah. So I was burned out a little bit on macros, but I was burned out on it not because I couldn't do it. I felt like I could hit my numbers in my sleep. But I felt like I had fallen into some habits where I was almost just hitting the macros and not doing all the little things, the deeper health things that I needed to be doing. And so when I switched to habits, I felt like it would take some of the pressure off of just hitting them right on, and I could focus on one tiny micro habit at a time. And a lot of that kind of was because I felt like I had no capacity. It was like I could hit the macros and do nothing else. I knew I needed to foundationally change a lot of things about kind of how I was doing stuff. I knew I needed a good nighttime routine. I needed a good morning routine. I needed to do the tiny little things to then make the bigger habits happen. And switching to habits gave me that ability. It was really helpful, but I was still searching for a missing piece because I switched to habits, but I was still cycling through that losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight. And I was approaching mid 40s. And honestly, my weight was about the same or creeping up slightly. And that was scary.
I love that quote that you said about your health during pregnancy being a peek into your future.
Scary.
Yeah, that
Yes.
is scary, but also probably eye-opening for a lot of people maybe that have been diagnosed with gestational diabetes. Where I feel like I've gotten most of my knowledge about glucose is from this book titled Glucose Revolution. If you are a Stay Fit Mom Ninja Insider, you may have done book club with us. We did this one a couple of years ago. And one of the things that I love about this book is it takes abstract sciencey concepts that I feel like can sometimes be overwhelming. And the author does such a good job of making those explainable for just the lay person that wants to understand their glucose and how they can monitor it. But what struck me about that book is just how often blood sugar affects things that we don't immediately connect it to energy, cravings, mood, sleep, and even fat loss. So blood sugar is such a foundational marker of our health. Why, Emily?
So the glucose insulin relationship, it controls so much of our metabolism, kind of like everything you said, how we feel, how our bodies work, how well we control our glucose has implications for the rest of our body and how it works, how our brain works, blood vessels. And so it is foundational.
What actually is a blood sugar spike?
Yes, a glucose spike is a rapid rise or a prolonged period in your glucose levels, I think clinically it's like exceeding what we would say 140 milligrams per deciliter. You're going to naturally get a glucose spike after meals or during intense exercise or in response to stress. So it is a natural physiological part of your body. However, the key is when they go really high or they hang out there for a while. And then frequent and prolonged spikes, those are harmful, the spikes that we're talking about, the ones that are not just naturally occurring after a meal or because of exercise. Those trigger stress and inflammation in your body. And so that is what damages your blood vessels, would lead to the risk of insulin resistance when your insulin is chronically high, or even down the line, type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. And so for people that do not have a glucose dysregulation issue, your glucose will rise and then it will naturally come down. You're probably not going to get super high peaks or ones that camp out elevated for a while. And like I said, occasional glucose spikes are normal physiological response to eating or exercise. But we want to aim to ensure that our glucose levels return back to that baseline pretty quickly.
Let's back up and tell people what glucose even is. If you just eat any food, your glucose is going to spike. But what specifically is glucose?
Yeah, so glucose is a molecule. It is made up of carbons, hydrogens. It is found in primarily carbohydrates. And so you're going to find simple sugars, high glucose, and they're going to also spike your glucose accordingly. Protein will have a little bit. And so your body will rise a little bit to protein and then probably lowest of all to fat. And so glucose is something that you find primarily in carbohydrates, plant-based foods.
So a lot of times, if you have a history of diabetes, they want to know about monitoring their carbohydrate intake because they know that their glucose spikes have to do with their carbohydrate intake.
Yeah. And so the thing is, not all carbohydrates are created equal. And this is why even we are tracking macros, we're emphasizing vegetables, which have a lot more fiber or they're more complex carbohydrates, rather than just simple carbohydrates, which would be things like sugar. A carbohydrate like white rice is probably going to spike your blood sugar more than, say, a sweet potato with the skin. And typically carbohydrates with more color, so green vegetables, berries, things with deep colors, tend to have more nutritive value. And so you're going to get less of a spike from things like that. That's not totally across the board, but that is a way that I kind of like to think about it. And so you will get typically higher spikes from things like white rice or pasta or a white bread that doesn't have a lot of fiber or kind of whole grain.
Foods that my kids love, like
Yeah.
a white bread, peanut butter and jelly sandwich, that would give you just a huge spike versus if you're having eggs with broccoli and tomatoes. I like how you just said, not all carbs are created equal. We have starches, fruit, and then we have sucrose. That would be straight table sugar, like a Skittle. That's majorly going to give you a glucose spike versus a carbohydrate with fiber in it or a complex carb. So then why does insulin matter?
Yeah. So insulin is a hormone. It is put out by your pancreas. It's kind of like a taxi for glucose. So it is glucose's taxi to get it into our cells. So when glucose is high, insulin's going to be higher and circulating in our body to take glucose and get it into our cells where it can be stored. One of insulin's primary functions is just to regulate your glucose levels, keep them in like a tight range. In a normally kind of metabolically healthy person, that would be between about 70 and 140. But when glucose starts to rise for whatever the reason, whether it's food or exercise, insulin will be released from your pancreas, and then it's going to do its taxi thing where it moves glucose out of the bloodstream into your cells, where then it can be used for energy. So when our glucose levels rise, so does our insulin. The main stimulant for glucose is eating. So particularly if you're eating foods rich in carbohydrates or simple carbs, that's the main reason why your insulin levels would rise. Another thing is it is an anabolic hormone. So it's going to tell your body to store excess glucose as fat instead of burning it as energy. And so because too much insulin is going to set you up for fat storage, that is one thing that can make it difficult to lose weight, even if you have a calorie restriction.
Okay, so the word insulin resistant, would that mean if you've had so many glucose spikes over time, your insulin is in overdrive and it's resistant to doing what it's supposed to do?
Yeah, I would say so. So it's like chronically elevated insulin. And I heard this analogy recently and I thought it was funny and relatable. Over time, as you have just chronically elevated insulin from your chronically elevated glucose, the cells will reject the insulin and it leads to insulin resistance. I don't know if reject is exactly the right verb, but the analogy is when you're home with your kids all day, you can become immune to the constant mom. But when dad's home, he's a little bit more sensitive to dad. He's a little bit more responsive. The analogy being constantly high insulin can kind of lead your cells to become just a little bit less responsive to the insulin.
That's a great analogy. I love it. And I think a lot of our stay-at mom community can identify with that. So essentially, if you're ever thinking about it, am I insulin resistant? It's when your kids are around and they're constantly saying, Mom, you don't even hear him anymore. You just don't even hear him. And dad walks in and he can just control the room somehow because he's not used to it. I love that analogy for
Relatable.
sure.
Yeah.
Love it. Okay. So what happens when we're constantly riding the roller coaster of these spikes?
Oh my goodness. So what happens because of that? Like your glucose is high, your insulin's high. Typically your glucose will then crash. And so it's just this like waves of high glucose, low glucose, high glucose. We're all familiar with an afternoon slump. Typically that's after lunch. Maybe you had the glucose spike from lunch, went, sat back down at your desk, and you just feel like you need a nap. So you have a lot of that peaks and valleys of glucose is a big thing. And then that's what leads to like moods and not feeling your best and maybe a little brain fog as well as damage to some body organs, blood vessels. This is why, because we talked about insulin being an anabolic hormone that stores fat, typically you start to store a little bit fat around your belly. And so that's what happens chronically.
Okay, so now let's go on to this experiment that you did on your own. What made you go, okay, I want to just start wearing a glucose monitor and tracking my glucose?
Yeah. So basically, I had constant swings in my blood sugar. That's what was going on. I was tired. I would have occasional headaches, hard time losing weight. I gained weight in my belly. I had constant sugar cravings from kind of the highs and lows. And I was just so mentally exhausted, emotionally exhausted. Just everyday life felt impossible. And I did not realize the reason for that. However, because like I said, I love to try things out for my health and I'm always interested in data and how my body responds to different things. A CGM, the continuous glucose monitor, had been on my radar for years. Probably there's a company that came out in 2019, and that was something I wanted to try at that point. I'd had a few pregnancies with the gestational diabetes. I knew with my family history, I knew that the insulin resistance was maybe a thing that I needed to really rein in, dial in, and see what was going on. And so CGMs had been on my radar for years, but at the time we lived abroad and CGMs were only available with a prescription. And it was really complicated to ship them overseas where we were living. You had to have a doctor sign off on it, and they were really expensive at the time. And so there were too many barriers. I wish I'd been able to in hindsight, but I couldn't, it wasn't feasible for me back in 2020. And so last year that I mentioned, I was feeling hopeless with the scale. I felt like I could make some good body composition progress with macros, but I was just still carrying around a lot of extra weight and that was not going away. I considered a GLP-1 for a hot second, but pretty quickly I realized that was not going to be for me. I had even experimented with taking a GLP-1 activator. A GLP-1 activator is just an over-the-counter supplement. It's intended to naturally stimulate your body's production of GLP-1, and some are really quite effective. And the one I took was effective, but honestly, I didn't really have an appetite problem or satiety problem. And I really did not like that. I felt like it completely dried up my appetite. And so I knew in the back of my mind there was probably something not working well with my body. And I knew it was probably glucose related, glucose dysregulation. So honestly, a client filled me in last year that she had started using a CGM. And at that point, I didn't even know that they were available over the counter.
Let's talk about that process, just
Yeah.
acquiring one.
Yeah.
How does the everyday person acquire one? You mentioned before you had to get a prescription from your doctor for one, which I'm sure is still available if you are maybe pre-diabetic or you hit certain health markers, you might be more likely to get one prescribed. But that wasn't the case for you, Emily.
No, and probably when I was interested, I just didn't have a lot of health markers. However, that's the thing with insulin resistance is called the silent warning because you can hang out being insulin resistant for 5+ years before prediabetes or diabetes develops. And they're so important, they should be widely available. But as far as acquiring one, they are now widely available. And that's just as of late 2024. There are a couple of main companies. One, you can get like the Dexcom Stelo is one variety of CGMs, and that's the company. And then Abbott Lingo. Those are like the two main options. And you can buy them directly from those companies. You don't need a doctor to sign off on it. I think even some of them are available just from a pharmacy, some pharmacies. They are not for people with diabetes like on insulin because these particular the over the counter ones, they don't have the necessary low blood sugar alarms. If you are someone on insulin, there's a risk of hypoglycemia. If your blood sugar gets too low, there's not an alarm to tell you that if you're not looking at it all the time. And yeah, so they are very widely available. It is very easy to buy them directly from the company or pick one up if you just want to try one.
And then the data, it just pops up on your phone.
Yes, so there's an app, whether you use the Stelo or the Lingo, each one has an app, and the data will sync from your sensor to your phone through a Bluetooth mechanism. Each one lasts for 14 days, and you apply it to the back of your upper arm. So it's fairly non-invasive. I will say I used to religiously do those finger pricks for gestational diabetes. Those picking up on glucose in your bloodstream, the way CGMs work is they're measuring it in what's called your interstitial fluid. And so it's just the fluid that surrounds your cells. So it's different. My sensors, they have a really thin and pretty flexible, almost a hair like a filament, and it just goes right through your outer skin. So it's a less deep puncture than drawing blood, if that makes sense. So it does not hurt. It doesn't hurt at all. I hardly even notice it. But because of that, because glucose travels to your bloodstream first, and then it has to go from your blood to your interstitial fluid, there's going to be more of a lag, like a 5, 10, or 15-minute lag.
Yes, it's not instantaneous.
Yeah, you'd get more immediate data from pricking your finger, but
Got it.
who wants to prick their finger?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. Awesome. Okay. This is something that I'm just personally curious about. And I feel like the author of Glucose Revolution has talked about this. The findings that you find on your glucose monitor, are they that specific to you? As in, if two women were to eat the same exact meal, could we have different glucose responses?
Oh, 100%. For so many reasons. I'll just list off a few reasons. First of all, your baseline metabolic health and where you are. Do you have insulin resistance? Is your glucose regulation pretty normal? And why I would say that is because I've noticed as I've been tracking my glucose for almost 8 months, my insulin sensitivity has improved. And so I do not get the same spikes that I used to when I first started.
Wow. That's exciting.
Fascinating. I think gut microbiome, that's one. The kind of the unique bacteria in everybody's guts are going to digest and just process stuff differently. And so that's kind of another reason. Age is a big one. Our insulin sensitivity definitely decreases as we age. And then if we're losing muscle mass, that just means we have fewer places to store and use blood sugar. If you have more belly fat, this is an interesting one, but your belly fat is going to release chemicals and certain fatty acids that actually block insulin signals. And then hormones, stress, sleep, and then just your eating habits. And are you eating really fast? What is the order that you're eating something in? All of that changes how your body absorbs and uses glucose. So there's so many factors, which I find interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, all the more appealing to get your own monitor so you can just see how is your body responding to sweet potato versus oatmeal versus if you have vegetables in the morning for breakfast or if you don't, or if you have dessert right after a meal versus if you have it on an empty stomach, or just all those little experiments I think would be so interesting to just see. So speaking of that, what surprised you most? Was there any foods that you ate or just maybe exercise wise or anything that you were like, whoa, I'm getting a spike from this and I wouldn't think I would, or anything like that?
Yeah. Yes. Yes. And I can talk about the foods that are really interesting, but I would say my take home message, I think about this all the time, is how profoundly important the small stuff is. I can be susceptible, like anyone else, to the all or nothing mindset. And especially, I would say, with workouts, I have often, like, if I can't get my full strength training workout in or at least a 30 or 45-minute walk, what's the point? Why bother? But oh my goodness, the difference in how well I can manage my glucose when I get a 10-minute walk in any time of the day versus when I don't is it's incredible.
Oh, and I've heard that. I keep hearing that. Do 10 squats after you eat. That's
Yes,
it. Just 10.
yes, and there have been so many times we were out eating or at somebody's house, and I knew my glucose was spiking, and I'm going to the other room or the bathroom and do 10 squats real quick,
You're like, I
and
gotta
it
go to the bathroom just to do my squats.
Yeah, is that crazy? I might have
Awesome.
done it at the retreat a few times too.
Yeah, I remember that. We would go on periodic walks at
Yeah.
the pool cabana. Yeah.
And there's this quote, I've shared it with some of my clients, and it goes something like, anything worth doing is worth doing halfway. And sometimes if we're macro trackers, we can have perfectionistic personalities, but there is power in that. And I have seen it time and time again.
Yes, which is just so hard for the perfectionist in you that's like,
Yeah.
forget it. If I can't do it right, I don't want to do it all. But
Yeah.
no, any amount of effort that you can put towards it will be worthwhile.
Whether it's a walk, squats, like we said, veggies, get an extra veggie in, an extra glass of water in. There was one day, and this was fasting. This was shocking, but I was eating the normal stuff that I always eat, and my glucose was just higher than it normally is. It was not high, but it was above my norm. I was low on my water. As soon as I filled up my bottle, drank a lot of my bottle, my glucose settled back down. It was
Wow. I would not think that.
yeah, so
Wow.
that extra glass of water, the small stuff, what I found is what makes the biggest difference.
That's so freeing too. It feels like there's a lot of freedom in some of these concepts that you have learned.
Definitely. And when I think of that with like fiber, I think for a lot of people, the fiber goal, 25 grams feels insurmountable, but it's a shift in mindset. Okay, I couldn't hit my fiber goal today, but can I get to 20? 15 is better than
Right.
just giving up. So, yeah.
I love that. Are there any foods that you thought were healthy, but they were not working well for your body?
So, I will say this, I have not fundamentally changed the foods I'm eating, if that makes sense, but I have certainly changed how much and how I'm doing them. And so I don't want to say I think these are unhealthy or anything because I don't. I think that they still fit, but I've had to be incredibly intentional. And so one of the most shocking foods was, and this was just a couple weeks ago, watermelon.
Oh, don't take watermelon from me, Emily. Don't you do it.
No, no, and I'm not taking it from me either. But, and this is like where the situational matters is because I was cutting up the watermelon for lunch. My breakfast had not been my usual. I had just grabbed a quick dish of some whole milk Greek yogurt. And so it had some protein and fat, but it wasn't as protein rich as my usual. Usually I'll have a higher protein, a little bit of fat, and some veggies for breakfast. I hadn't done that. I did not have a crazy amount of watermelon, but I had snacked on pieces as I was cutting it before lunch.
Interesting.
It's not like I had it at lunch and at the end of the meal, but that is the one and only time that my glucose has gone off the charts. Like, my monitor
Really?
cannot read it.
I do know it's got a lot of carbs in it. Just when I log watermelon in my
Yeah.
macros, I'm always disappointed. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's so high. So it is high in sugar. There's a reason why we love it so much.
Yeah. Pizza for me is really tough, and I've tried all the things with pizza. I still will have pizza, but there was one day, I think we had gotten this kind of gourmet-ish deep dish hand tossed pizza, 20 inches or something, but I had one slice, which I was like, "Okay." I had salad beforehand, I walked right after, and despite all that, and this was early in my monitor experience, maybe if I did it now, it would be a little bit different just because I know I've improved my insulin sensitivity, but my blood sugar was high and I had the typical slump. I was tired, nap, thirsty. I felt like I tried to do all the things right and it was not responding in a good way. That doesn't mean I avoid pizza, but I certainly try to be intentional with how much or in what way that I'm
Well,
doing.
and it helps you to go, is this worth it the next time? It's one thing to just think, oh, I'm a little tired, but then to have the data to back up, it's spiking your blood sugar. You got a huge spike and you can't bring it back down. And then your brain kind of syncs the two together. Oh, is
Yeah.
this actually worth it? Because I am in such a slump right now and I don't feel great. I don't know. I think that's so interesting and awesome.
It's interesting because it has connected so many dots for me for how I feel in my body with the real-time data of what I'm doing to my body and stuff. And I don't mean that in a bad way, but it has connected so many dots. It is not a random way that I'm feeling. And like there's a reason.
So interesting. Okay, so tell us, what are the top 5 changes that you've made because of your
Yes.
monitor?
Okay, so let's see. Definitely, I would say consistent eating schedule. I finally quit letting my busyness dictate my schedule. I could eat pretty erratically before and then just try to catch up later in the day or at night, and that was killing me.
Thing.
And then, like, along with that, my meal timing and window, previously, I would not eat until 10 in the morning, but then I was finishing later at night, and because you're less sensitive to insulin at night, just
Right.
insulin is, like, works on a circadian rhythm like a lot of our hormones do, and so because of that, I have shifted to start eating at 8 and I finish eating at 5 or 6, and that
Okay.
for me, that's been very helpful.
Interesting. I have heard that you are most sensitive to glucose first thing in the morning, right?
It's interesting, you can eat the exact same thing morning and night and get a little bit of a different response to it.
And I remember this big takeaway from Glucose Revolution. If you have the option between savory and sweet for breakfast, go savory because you can have the sweet later on. It's not like you're eliminating the sweet, it's just you're changing the timing of when you're having the sweet.
Definitely, and that I would say is one of the big things I've done. I love desserts, and I used to when I was counting my macros. I would always wanna have a sweet treat at night after the kids were in bed, like, I made it through the day, my own personal celebration. I think that was also killing me
Yeah.
too, and so that's one of the things that's made a big difference. I never will have a standalone dessert. I don't have desserts all the time, and this is what's been fascinating is I don't have cravings like I used to.
Really?
I do not have cravings for sweets like I used to. It is not like I don't ever want something, I do, but it's just not quite the same. As I've managed my glucose, some of the nagging things that I didn't even realize it was just part of my personality before, that's gone away, which
That's
is really
awesome. That's
interesting.
such a huge win.
If I'm gonna have a dessert, it's gonna be at the end of a meal. I do try to eat my veggies first, and then my protein, and then carbs. Of course, when you have mixed foods, that goes out the window, but I do try to start every meal, including breakfast, with a vegetable, which
Okay. And you said walks was
I
another one?
walk every day now. Before I started, I was at a point where I'd become really sedentary between the homeschooling and then working on your computer. There's a lot of sitting, but I was just before at a point where I had no energy. And so it was hard to get off the hamster wheel of no energy, sedentary, no energy. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
so walking is non negotiable. Even if it's 10 minutes or 15 minutes, I'm going to do something.
Do you time that after your meals specifically or just random walks?
I try to, and especially if I do try to make a point if I am gonna have something that I know has a lot more carbs, I will because I know I might get more of a spike, but that's not always possible. I will do body weight squats several times a day. I try to do that after meals at the minimum because I feel like it takes no time to do a few squats after you eat.
I don't want to make sure I got them all. So your first one, you said you're eating consistent meals
Yeah, I
and then
eat 3 meals same time every day. This one's kinda goes along with it, but I've shifted when those meals are. So,
mhm.
instead of having breakfast later, I'm having breakfast a little bit earlier and then eating dinner a little bit earlier.
So consistent meals and then also shifted the timing of your meals. And
Yeah.
then you said also no standalone sweets or desserts. You're having those with a meal because it's just not worth it. It's not worth another spike if you can avoid it.
Yeah, and slump and feeling tired, and then you feel like you need to eat something because you have no energy.
Okay. And then what was your other one? Veggies,
Yeah, I do try to stick to that, the veggie at the beginning of meals. I try to stick to the order, veggies, then
protein, then carbs.
yeah, perfectly, but I do my best, and I do the veggies with all my meals, not just lunch and dinner, has been pretty helpful.
Awesome. And then walks, you said 10 minutes.
Yeah,
here and there.
something, anything, just something every
Yep.
day.
Love it.
Cassie, honestly, shout out. She, even when I was at my worst, she helped me lower the bar so much to, hey, just get that 10-minute walk in. And so she's been encouraging that from the beginning. And I've said this to her, but I feel like the combination of the CGM and the habits for me and magic. It is the accountability with the habits. I can focus on what I want to focus on at a deep level, but then I still have the real time data and I can make adjustments. And that has been awesome. It has moved the needle for me. My body feels like it's finally starting to work like it should.
I should have started with this, but your progress pictures are so incredible. What proof? Yes, you have the data and you're feeling so good, but then the pictures are like, whoa. I don't want to say that you have to be on a CGM by any means, but it does intrigue me to want to. Maybe I should do this experiment just to see.
Honestly, I have encouraged a couple of clients to give it a try. You can do one for 2 weeks. And so even if you just wanted a short little experiment, but I do think if you are someone that it is the biggest slog, the scale hardly moves for you, you're honestly doing all the things, right? You're not getting much traction there. It might be an interesting thing to try just to see. I don't think every tool is for everyone, but it has been very effective for me. And when I see my pictures, I almost cannot believe because I was stuck for so long.
Yeah. And the changes have been so minimal, it sounds like. It doesn't sound like you had to do anything that drastic. You really just had to change up timing.
It's the small stuff. Totally. It's the tweaks.
Yes. How did you know what to change?
I've read Glucose Revolution in the past, so that really helped. And just like I said, I'm a nerd. I read a lot, I listen to a lot. I knew, but until I had the kind of moment by moment data, it was less cemented in my brain. It was like, oh, yeah, sure. But then seeing the impact is for me. And I will say this, and this is just a personality thing. My best class in college, I had a perfect average in statistics. And so data and numbers and graphs. And if you have something like that, if there's an experiment I can do and I can get some data, that sticks for me in a powerful way.
Yep.
And so
It's just a tangible marker that you
yes,
can see. Yeah, I agree. I'm with you on that, Emily. I think it's just so interesting. Do you think that it could make some people obsessive?
I think that's probably person specific, depending on your personality. Not for me. Like I said, give me all the data, the graphs. It clicks, makes sense. But I think don't we always have a few clients who feel like macros is too much? So
Sure.
yeah, I think the possibility exists. It could make people. But for me, I feel like I've had a lot more mental space and freedom. I know what to do, especially after your first couple weeks, seeing how your body responds. I can predict kind of how it's going to respond. So it's
That's so
in
cool.
in some ways it is freed up mentally for me, if that makes
Mhm.
sense.
Oh, yeah. Do you think that you're going to wear one forever?
Maybe. I am gonna keep going. I'm a little bit over halfway to my goal, and I feel like it is a really good tool for me.
Yep.
So, who knows?
And it's not that big of a deal, right? You can
It's not.
swim, you can do all of your regular life stuff. It's not like
Yes.
bothering you.
Right.
So that's awesome. Okay, so calories in versus calories out. How has wearing a CGM changed that mentality for you? Are you still trying to hit a certain calorie goal, or are you not even looking at calories at all anymore with your habits program that you're on right now?
That's a good question. So, I would say I definitely think that is maybe an oversimplification. I would say calories in and calories out, it does matter. However, there have been animal studies that suggest that high insulin drives your hunger, it lowers your metabolic rate. And so, even in these animal studies where the animals have reduced their calories quite a bit, they're still gaining weight when insulin's high. And I would say I've had clients with type 1 diabetes and they know because they've told me that when they have to increase their insulin, they're going to gain weight. And
Mm.
so I think that's kind of well known, even if it's very common to just say calories in, calories out is the only thing that matters. I would say if you are in less than ideal metabolic health, it may matter. The kind of higher insulin that's constantly circulating, that might have an impact, a significant impact. And certainly I've seen it with myself. I'm not willing to say that calories in, calories out doesn't matter. I know roughly where a deficit will be for me. And so I'm still shooting for around that. I track my protein and I try to stick to a certain calorie intake. So I would say it's probably both and.
Yep.
I think they're both important.
Yeah. This is just one more step. If you're not having success with sticking to the macros, calories in, calories out, there could be a missing piece. And that missing piece could be a number of things. It could be, we've talked a lot about comprehensive blood work and getting your hormones checked and perimenopause. It could be insulin. I like how you said that.
And I will say, I am really excited. I just signed up to get my blood work done with Merrick Health. I had done some blood work before I started the CGM, and I am so thrilled to see how
The
it changed.
differences.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
so exciting. And anything else that they'd highlight, like
Yeah.
here, let's optimize Emily even more. And
Yeah.
I love that. I'm excited for you. Okay. Is there a single habit that gives you the biggest return for the least amount of effort?
Okay, so I didn't mention this, but I should. My sleep has been in a really good place for a long time. But I would say if your sleep is not in a good place, probably it's going to be sleep. And then the walking, like I talked about. For me, that's been huge.
Love it. Is there a food that gets a bad reputation that actually performs really well?
Again, I think it's so situational. I will say one of my success stories from a couple weeks ago when we were on our trip to Disney is my husband and I went out to have some sushi. And previously, sushi probably would have spiked me big time. But I had some seaweed salad beforehand. I'm sure it had some vinegar on it, and seaweed, I think, has some fiber. And I ate a lot of sushi because sushi is my favorite food in the whole world. And I got a very minimal spike. So
Wow.
we had walked all day. I had the salad beforehand. It's all the little stuff. I did want to say my years counting macros, I think was so foundational in realizing and shifting my perspective. And I still believe all foods can fit. Food is fuel or it's a tool. I still believe all foods fit. And it's just a matter of tailoring it for your situation, if that makes sense.
Yeah, this has been so good. I hope that people come away just inspired and excited for not necessarily that you need to get a CGM, although I might be. Every time I talk to you, Emily, I'm so curious. How much do they cost, by the way? We didn't talk about that. If you go to
Yeah,
one-
so they are relatively affordable. So you can get one for 2 weeks. It's about $45 or $50. And then
Okay.
they'll run you about 90 or 100.
For
So
two. Okay.
for
So
two
you said for the month.
for the
Is
month.
that what you said?
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Which
Okay.
honestly, when I started looking into them, it was multiple hundreds of dollars.
So that's a lot less expensive. than it
Yes.
was.
Yes.
Okay.
It's not $5, but it's not 300 either.
So interesting. And if you are just really curious about all of this stuff and you are like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. I want to know about a CGM or I want to know more about blood glucose levels. I would highly encourage you to start with that book, Glucose Revolution. I think that will help so much. And I read that book years ago and it really did change the way I eat, changed the way that I look at food in terms of feeding my own family. It's just another tool to put in your toolbox. But so happy for you, Emily, that you have found something that is just working for you, that is clicked. I love to see it. And so this just makes me think the woman I want to become isn't ultimately about weighing less or eating perfectly or having a flat stomach. It's about being a woman who lives with wisdom instead of reacting on autopilot. And I feel like that's kind of your story.
I love that. Thank you for having me. Right now feels a lot better than it did last year. And if anybody's feeling stuck out there, give it a try. It's not hopeless. I felt hopeless about a year ago, and there is hope. And there's a lot of tools. You've talked to quite a few people about different tools. GLP-1 is a tool. The CGM is a tool. There's so many different things you can try, but you don't have to stay stuck.
That's right. Thank you again, Emily. I'm going to let you get back to your family, your homeschool life, all the different things that you're doing. Thank you again for just spending this part of your morning with me.
Thank you, Tracy.
All right. We'll catch you next time on the Stay Fit Mom podcast.
We appreciate you tuning in to the Stay Fit Mom podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. Connect with us on social media and head to stayfitmom.com for more resources and tips. You've got this. See you next time.